Okay, take it from here, Brian, please.
Um, let's, of course, you know, I hope you all know that I'm using the thing as a kind of a humorous thing. I had a radio show I did a few years back. I call it the show. So I had a guest who was supposed to be on the show, and they at the last minute didn't appear, and I really wasn't ready with any kind of plan B guest or conversation, and I couldn't do the topic we were going to talk about without them. So, and this is being broadcast through the New York metropolitan area, and I just suddenly got, I don't typically get nervous, but I suddenly got nervous, and I must have done 150 to 200 ums in that show. So I call it the show. So anyway, is a great placeholder if you don't mind irritating everybody. So I hopefully won't say ums to you guys all day today, although I don't really feel nervous either. So one of the things I wanted to do is make sure that this was interactive. So when we have things, when you have a question or a thought that comes up or a contribution, please go ahead and just feel free to chime in. And then the other thing I wanted to do is do a little bit of a recap of what we did a couple of weeks ago, which is about giving and receiving, just to kind of make sure we're looking at the foundations of what we're going to talk about today, coming from the giving and receiving topic. And I was just wondering if I could ask anybody who was at the meeting 2 weeks ago, who could volunteer some thoughts about what their takeaways were from the giving and receiving, we'll call it a presentation, but the experience, and then, I mean, it may be more than one if you have a couple of people who'd like to say something, only because I'd like to be able to get some measure as to whether the things that we're talking about is being helpful and maybe is getting integrated into our experience. So I'll just pause and wait for people to say something.
Svetlana asked me a question, which was very beautiful. Svetlana, do you feel comfortable to share? Not only about the question, but what you took away from the last presentation of Brian.
Yeah, sure, no problem. I was doing something different the other day, so I was remembering the fake it till you make it lane, and like how we paraphrase that, instead of faking it, to faith in it, like so having faith. So like I was trying to remember how we said it, and like I asked Madlena to help me, and she pitched that in. So definitely like having more faith and having more confidence. And the second thing that I'd say, like I took from last time, was accepting a thank you unconditionally, accepting a compliment unconditionally, not diminishing it and not saying, oh no, it's okay, no, it was nothing much. Accept it unconditionally so that you don't stop the flow of energy. So for me personally, that was like a really great reminder that own what you've done, and remember that it may look like something small for you, but it can be really something big for someone else. So own it and accept it unconditionally, so that you don't stop the flow of giving and receiving.
Cool.
That's from me, Madlena.
Excellent. This is genius. Thank you. Thank
You're
you,
welcome.
Svetlana, for jumping in, because she sent me this question, and I was thinking, we quote you many times, Brian, with all our intentions. Are you a hunter? Are you? So you have brought beautiful slogans to our community. Thank you so much. So
well, it's always my pleasure. So anybody else have anything to add, or should I just start marching forward?
Shama wants to say something. Thank you, Svetlana.
For me, Brian, it was everything that Svetlana has said, you know, about accepting everything gracefully. But it's that little, when you went a bit deeper into that by not receiving, right, the effects that it can have on the other. So maybe feel if the gift is returned, you know, so if somebody's saying thank you, accept it. But the consequences, if you don't, you say, oh, it's nothing. You're actually refusing that gift that they want to offer, which they are giving gracefully to you. So to me, I do that. I mean, I'll put my hands up to that. But now by realizing that effect, the depth of that, right, I'm a lot more conscious, right? So in the last sort of couple of weeks, if somebody says anything, any nice compliment, I say thank you wholeheartedly.
Sometimes I even tell people I fully receive that, just because it adds a nice little acknowledgement for that they did something, and it really is a full it fully brings a gift back to the giver. If they give you a compliment and you receive the compliment, it gives them a gift back too. So one of the things we tend to do is reject the gift because of maybe we don't think we're worthy, or we reject the gift because we think there may be ulterior motives or obligations attached to that. So there are these things that take place in our calculus as we are receiving these messages. Yet something as simple as thank you means you can still receive the gift from somebody who's trying to create obligation. You can still do that without having any obligation. So these are kinds of things.
Sorry, I'd like to think that I've evolved past my fear of receiving. That's what I wanted to finish.
Okay, well, that's a challenge because giving and receiving is more of an art.
Yeah.
And sometimes art takes a little while to settle in on. So okay, thank you. Thank you for those. Anybody else have any thoughts? We can just grab them as we go along and talk about those things. So today, I want to just add that everything we're going to be doing in these presentations, especially the ones that I'm going to be part of, are really going to be about providing possibly new information or possibly a new perspective or a reminder of something that you've already known and have since kind of maybe distanced yourself or don't remember. Or the third possibility is completely validating or confirming something you already know or believe. So, there may be places along the way, there may be a fourth category where we're providing information that's in contrast to something you believe in. That's great because I think that creates healthy conversation. So, when we were talking about giving and receiving last time, we had to make it short. We should have the ability to fully receive unless we are concretely aware that there is an obligation being attached to that gift, in which case we have every right to reject the gift. We also have every right to receive the gift and not have an obligation attached to it, because we can just say, I will receive this with nothing in return due. So you could do those kinds of things. However, this is going to, that kind of thinking leads us to this conversation experience we're going to have today, which is about receiving and taking. And I'm going to say on the converse side of this is giving and sacrifice. And they have some very common distinctions between giving and sacrifice and taking and receiving and taking. And they also have some, I guess we'll call it oppositional energy. Yet you'll find there is some common threads for these two discussions, these two elements of talking about stretching past the giving and receiving discussion. So I would like everybody to think about the idea of receiving and taking as being receiving is something that, based on what we talked about before, receiving also becomes a gift, not just to me if I'm receiving something, but it becomes a gift to the giver, whether it's a compliment or an item or some piece of information or whatever the case may be. So to put my initial distinction between that kind of receiving and taking is done with the intention to exploit or the intention to grab. I think the way to look at it is that a taker is not a healthy receiver. A taker is somebody who maybe has, I would argue, elements of self-worth may be involved. Not to say for anybody who's had challenges receiving that that's the same thing. Although we have noticed in the conversation pieces that it's entirely possible if we don't receive, it's because we don't feel worthy. But what if we're a taker? And then I say now, a taker doesn't feel worthy. A taker has a conscious limitation that they're not worthy of something that they've earned per se. They have operating in a place of lack, and the reason why they take something is because they don't think they can get it any other way. So when I look at it, I even in one of the aspects of my own personal journey was I can't argue that it was ill will in taking of things, but there would be times when I thought the only way I could have something was to just grab it, like an opportunity, grab it. Like maybe, has anybody ever been to an event where they're shooting prizes up into the audience and you're in the audience and you might even become very aggressive to get that t-shirt or whatever it is that's going on, because that's a kind of a taking mentality as opposed to the receiving mentality. One of the things that I have worked to adopt over the years is not to focus on the energy in the room in terms of that kind of thing that's being lobbed out there. I've been to an event where people have given out $100 bills or $100 whatever currency, because it creates excitement or energy in the room, but it kind of reveals something to you about some of the people who leap at these things. At times they're not doing it just because it's a gift, but they're doing it because they think that if they don't act, they won't get $100 another way, or whatever the case may be. So this is a little bit of a kind of a nuanced thing, but I want you to think about people who are takers. And I'll just give this little side expression. If you've ever heard the expression, there are givers and takers. The takers eat better and the givers sleep better. And but I will also say the receivers can sleep better. It's the takers that have figured out that the only way for them to get something is to grab it. It's kind of a very aggressive energy when you use the word grab, by the way. So takers grab things because they don't have the confidence that if they don't grab it, they will have any other access to it, because they operate in a place of lack. They operate in a place of insecurity. They operate in a place of maybe even low self-worth because they don't think they can earn it justifiably any other way. So, and then let's go back to the other side of the discussion, which is talking about giving and sacrifice. You'll notice there's some common threads in this discussion too. So if I'm giving, I have a sense of simultaneously receiving. That's why a lot of us do give, because we feel like we're getting something back. An act of kindness, an act of compassion, an act of donation, or an act of even contrition, that kind of gift. I still get something back from it by virtue of being kind of showing up as being the one, or being sincere or authentic, or whatever the case may be. And if I sacrifice, the idea is that I am giving something outside of myself. I'm giving something where there's nothing left for me. In fact, if you look at the word sacrifice in the word Latin, as sacer, which is setting apart or making something apart, and then to make. So to make separate, or to make, actually when I say to make, which is the other aspect of the word sacrifice, I think it's facere, which means to make. And when you would to make apart, to make separate, is kind of the idea is I'm going to give without any thought of myself or others. And often we use the word sacrifice as even like a martyr type of experience, or whatever the case may be. So we could be doing sacrifice because we're putting others before ourselves and there's an extraordinary need. So there can be a case where sacrifice may have high value human contribution. But most of the time, people are giving of themselves because that's what fills holes in themselves, instead of giving of them to be part of a connectedness or I'm having a little language challenge here today. They're integrating themselves in the act of giving, as opposed to giving for the purpose of with nothing in return. We've seen this in parents who will give to their child, and they will lose sleep, they'll get sick, they'll hold down 2 jobs, they'll do all these things to make their child's future better or their child's life better, And we can already sort of see how it becomes a little distancing from other healthy aspects of relationships and things. That sacrifice thing is to make separate. It actually does make things separate. It actually can affect our relationship. So as I sacrifice for my daughter, then I might not be actually building the relationship with my daughter that will serve her in the long run. She may need a relationship more with me today or at any given time than she does with anything that she could receive from my sacrifice. So when we're looking at giving and receiving, we're looking at these ideas is that there is an integration, there's a connectedness, there's a kind of a full circle aspect of giving and receiving is the same energy or looping back on itself or those kinds of things. And when we're taking and sacrificing, we're doing so because we don't have, usually it's about confidence and self-worth. We don't have the confidence that if we don't sacrifice or we don't take, then the objectives that we hold will be achievable. So I opened this all up for now discussion because this is all very nuanced stuff, yet it really does get to the point, since a lot of people, a lot of us who are light workers are consistently giving without our self-regard, and we're often not receiving when we should be. So this is a great opportunity for us to explore, do we incidentally become takers or do we become sacrificers in the process based on the elements of setting ourselves apart from the actual integration of giving and receiving and the benefits of giving and receiving. So first of all, was I clear? Because this is such a tricky subject here. So yeah, thumbs up or, okay. So what are the thoughts? Don't all speak at once, by the way.
Well, for me, Brian, thanks for that. As you were speaking, I just took a couple of notes here, but the first thing that was coming to mind was I put a comment there in chat around shared value, and the intention behind the giver comes into the whole equation. I think we talked about this a couple of weeks ago as well, but it's I think it's a combination, and the shared value really came to the fore when you're describing the parents giving. And for me, if that's out of kilter or not shared, that is not shared value for the giver and the receiver, then that becomes problematic. But if you've got shared value going on where the giver is giving and also receiving through the process of giving, that for me, the more equilibrium there is in that relationship, the better. So for example, so when I give, there's a narcissistic element of giving as well, because the giver also receives through being very happy with helping other people. We all love to give and help other people and assist other people and help them with whatever challenge they have going on in their life. But there's also an automatic element of that when we give, there's also a very, very rapid a benefit for ourselves through the feelings we receive in that giving process. So that for me is back to shared value as well, that it's an ongoing dynamic between, when I give, I'm getting actually as much immediately through the process of giving, because I'm feeling great about being able to help or support a person and assist a person. And that's happening the whole time. And I think that's where the equilibrium in that single instance occurs, but also in the combination of all the giving and the receiving in the typical day. It's back to that equilibrium, I guess, I think, when I think about it. And that was kind of coming up for me as you were describing what you were describing there. It's that balance and equilibrium between giving and making sure that we're not ignoring our own needs and being out of kilter with giving too much, making sure we're taking care of our own needs as well.
Cool. Yeah, we have equilibrium may be a little bit of a challenging thing, because sometimes the receiver of a gift gets maybe seems like they're getting a bigger aspect to this thing. So I would say there has to be some equity, some aspect of equilibrium, as you describe it, and then the awareness to go with that as well, so that I know that I can't reject a gift without knowing that I've blocked the gift back to the giver. So that kind of thing is very important, in terms of being aware at all times what's swirling around us. Another thing that comes to mind here is also, just remember from our discussion last time, is that when we are doing something with an aspect of love versus an aspect of fear. And I find those things, love and fear, are not separable in some ways, because the world is actually fueled by fear in certain situations and fueled by love in other situations. And we as beings, especially as light workers, need to be consciously journeying towards the love side of this discussion as frequently as we can. And learning to release those fears and teaching others to release those fears, so that they're able to move on their journeys more with more ease along the way. And the giving, receiving comfortably is actually a form of ease that comes out of that journey from the fear-based posture to the love-based posture. And then what we're kind of talking about here is the difference between a giver and a taker, or a giver and a sacrificer, and a receiver and a taker is where are they on the love fear spectrum. So if I am operating in a place of love, I'm able to give without looking for it as a form of validation. I'm doing it because, yes, it feels good, but it's not because I'm looking emotionally to fill a hole. I don't need the accolades. I don't need recognition per se. And so that's the kind of giving that I would aspire us all to be part of, is giving even if you don't get a recognized or a thank you, whatever the case may be. The thank you is an acknowledgement and can be a gift back to you, but you can receive the gift even if there is no acknowledgement, because you can have faith it until you make it, right? You can have faith that the universe will let that gift get used in some way that's meaningful, whether it's today or 10 years down the road or whatever the case may be. And so in some ways, I look at the ideas, love in the universe are very, very connected. And so if we don't get acknowledgement, just know the universe has got your back on this one. So you can still feel good. You can still have faith that you've done something of value, even if it's not, you're not getting recognition, or you're not seeing recognition that they have received that value. On the other hand, we all see examples of sacrifice and taking. One of the things that's in relationships, say romantic relationships, it's not out of the question if somebody uses, Seamus used the word narcissist before, and then I have a very specific view of what narcissism is, and that is it's a fragile ego. In broad strokes, it's a fragile ego that is defending itself by making sure it creates a picture of the universe. A narcissist is trying to curate their journey, as opposed to openly and be in the moment and travel on that journey. So, and I have a lot of intimacy with this concept of narcissism in that regard, and because it is one of the ultimate, people who are narcissists are ultimately have unconsciously very low self-worth images. So and then there's the other kind of fragile ego, which we could call the ongoing victim. So, and they tend to couple up. So you get victim and narcissist, and it turns out victims can be narcissistic also, and narcissists can be victims also in these relationships, because there's a dynamic that takes place in relationships, whether they're romantic or familial or other things. The victim narcissist cycle that takes place in there is all about fragile egos. And when we look at what fragile egos will do is I might want to give so that you might love me better, or I might feel like you love me better. And so when I'm giving, I'm not doing it for a healthy equity integration kind of concept. I'm giving of myself because I want that validation that I'm worthy of love, that I don't even think that I myself am worthy of, but I'm looking for other people to fill my sense of worthiness. And then same thing happens with a narcissist. And in fact, narcissists will give in the exact same way, but they usually don't give inside the relationship. They give outside the relationship seeking validation and filling that hole of self-worth through external accolades and acknowledgement. And so it can be a real challenge for people who have low self-worth and who are sitting in that fragile ego space to actually ever authentically give and receive. So they end up becoming sacrificers or takers. and sometimes both. In fact, a narcissist is very often a giver, a sacrificer, and a taker. It may not do it exactly the same time, but they end up exuding both of those postures along the way, because that's the only way they can feel good about themselves, because they don't have a good relationship with their internal core compass. They have their entire sense of self-worth comes from what they can paint and how long people will accept that image. So, okay, I'm sorry, I was pontificating there.
No, thanks for that. No, because it does come back to intention, I think, as well. It plays a key part, and that's something else I was thinking about. Maybe someone else wants to chime in now as well, but it's around the receiver being clued into or evaluating the attention that's coming from the receiver too. I mean, that plays into it too, is that, the receiver can receive with grace. And it goes back to what Svetlana mentioned earlier on about, unconditionally. And again, I challenge that maybe a little bit, because sometimes we might be taken advantage of by the intention of the giver, who's coming with the poor intention as to why and wherefore they're giving. And they take advantage of our ability to accept with grace without checking, well, what really is behind the intention of the giver,
Mm-hmm. This is where having good personal power and the ability to set boundaries can be really huge, because you could have somebody who's using their sacrificial energy or their giving to create effect energy. And they may be giving you a gift, and you could say, well, I'm not really worried about whether they're giving it. The universe is provided, because it could very well be that that gift could be well timed for something that serves you or an organization you serve, whatever the case may be. So you can that's where having good sense of personal power and a sense of how you stand in that personal power with love and truth and faith and all these other things that are like supporting attributes. And then you could say, you can actually set a boundary in your acknowledgement. I fully receive this gift for the purpose of, supporting this cause, or I'm going to use this for great effect, without any conditions. You can acknowledge this gift without any conditions. If you suspect there's a manipulation or a obligation being inserted into the process because the giver has got some ulterior motive that is not healthy, you can still receive that gift if you want to, and use your boundary language to say, I fully accept this gift without any obligation for the purpose of whatever you want to use it for.
Mm-hmm.
This can also be applied when you're on the giving side, because if someone is too needy and they just want to receive, you need to use the healthy boundaries when and how to give, so that you don't sacrifice too much of your time, energy, like everything, so that it goes like into your sacrificial areas, and you don't have enough like for yourself and for your other projects. So boundaries should be exercised like in every activities, like both like on the giving and on the receiving side, like to be like healthy and conscious.
I think that's beautifully said, Svetlana. The idea of personal power and the boundaries that we can extend from those kinds of things are there for our protection. So yeah, actually, Donal just said something in the chat here about all egos are fragile, and I was first thinking, do I agree with that? I think all egos can be fragile, but I don't know that I completely agree that all egos are fragile. I will say, yes, fragile to a degree. Our ego is actually our survival engine. That's the thing that makes us as human beings not sacrifice when it's unnecessary. It's if we're operating at a healthy ego level, we are aware of our journey in the way of what is our personal power, what is our personal truth, authentically, or understanding our personal power, our personal truth, our sense of trust and faith, And for that matter, we have the ability to love without conditions, or more likely to love without conditions, if we have healthy ego. Ego is just the defense mechanism. What happens is it gets hyper defensive when people have a deeply fragile ego. So, this is a spectrum discussion, so I'm not here to completely disagree with Donald, Dan, I'm not, sorry, please yell out how to pronounce your name. The idea though is that we all have ego. It's all there. The question is are we operating in a healthy manner around that ego, or which is where love is really a huge instrument for supporting that, or are we operating in a place of fear, which usually creates fragility and creates all these strange effects on our journey with regard to our ego. So I don't know that if I made that clear, but I just, from my perspective, that's what I view ego as. And when I say a fragile ego, somebody is always curating their experience, curating their journey, curating how they look to the world, because they can't be seen for who they think they really are, because they really are. Fragile ego and self-worth issues go hand in hand. So,
Brian, let's ask the audience, because we're diving really deep. Do we want to go into at least one breakout room, or we want to stay in the main room? So what?
Well, I think today, I don't want to talk for a whole hour today like I did last time. So I think we should do something for our breakout, but I do want to sort of stress one more thing. The reason for these conversations on my part is when we get a chance to explore these issues, they may not be about us. They could be about us. It could be about people we know, and it makes us a better light worker or provider of service and value to humanity if we understand more about the nuances of these things, like giving and receiving, taking and receiving, giving and sacrifice. If we understand these things better, it will make us a better practitioner. And also, these conversations, one of the things that happens in the giving and receiving discussion, there's a lot of people who are in the light worker space who don't feel comfortable asking for money or charging their real worth. Sometimes they don't even recognize their full worth. So by having these discussions, we start working on these things about where are we in the self-worth category so that we can receive what we're supposed to receive. Because if we are not receiving and we can't sustain ourselves, then we've broken the mission that we have born to deliver, or we may discover that we're born to deliver, whatever the case may be. So reason for these discussions and the reason for this depth is to just give us a chance to start exploring what it is in us and the people we know and the people we serve that fall into this discussion, so that we can be better at doing what we're doing for them and also for ourselves in the process. So I just, for the ultimate goal for your Holistic Academy is to make us all more successful, defining that the way you want to. Although I would suggest that money can be a very good byproduct of success, and that's part of the, what are we going to do to get us all there? So the purpose of this group is to bring these discussions to the table and start including them in the thinking about how we're going to make our journeys better and serve humanity better in the process. Okay, now we can go to a breakout room.
What is the leading question to the breakout room?